name is David McLeod. I am your life mastery coach, author of the wonderful little book, A Life to Die For, and also the lead author of the new best-selling book, Gifts of Wisdom, Practices for Healing and Empowerment, that just got published in October on Amazon. I hope you'll go check that out. I'm also one of the co-authors in the best-selling series, The Wellness Universe Guide to Complete Self-Care, and we'll probably be talking a little bit about that today as we proceed. So welcome to Life Mastery TV, your source for inspiration, empowerment, and fulfillment. This is episode 259, and our topic title today is Rise Strong After Adversity. I'm sure you've experienced your own adversity one way or another. It manifests most deeply for us in the form of grief after some kind of loss. Whether it's the death of a loved one, the end of a relationship, or a significant life change, grief can shake the foundation of your being. The pain of loss can seem insurmountable, leaving you questioning your purpose, your identity, and sometimes even your will to live or to move forward. Yet within this profound challenge lies the potential for transformation. By facing grief head on and allowing yourself to process that pain, you create space for healing and growth. Spiritual resilience, which is what we're going to be talking about today, is what empowers you to turn this pain into a pathway back to your authentic self. Well, adversity is an inevitable part of life, but it doesn't need to be a showstopper. How you navigate it makes all the difference. And for this episode of Life Mastery TV, I'm delighted to bring back grief coach and spiritual mentor, Carrie Doubts, who brings years of experience and personal wisdom to this conversation. With Carrie's wise and insightful perspective, we'll look at this challenging aspect of life with compassionate hopefulness. Please welcome Carrie Doubts to the program.
Hello,
and
everyone.
There she is, like magic.
Yes, like magic. Thank you, technology. Thank you, David. It's really great to be with you on your show again.
Yeah, it's been way too long. I think it's been at least 2 years. And I know I've reached out to you a few times, but I'm glad we're finally able to make it work and our schedules kind of blended nicely. So welcome back. And how are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm doing well. Looking forward to it's about holiday time, a week before Christmas here. So,
Right.
yeah, and we'll probably get into some of the changes in my life that have occurred since you and I talked last on your show. So, yeah,
Right.
I'm doing well.
Good. Now, I know this has been a topic that's been near and dear to your heart and not necessarily in the best possible way. Would you like to share a little bit about that and how you've come to move into the idea of being a grief coach and that sort of thing?
Sure. Well, I got my training to be a marriage and family therapist way back in the 90s. And at some point in the process, I really decided that being a therapist was not the path for me. It was too clinical, too medical, talking about what's wrong with people and things like that. And I really got interested in becoming a coach. So I did coach training program. And in the course of that coach training program, they offered us the opportunity to learn a specialization. And for some reason, the specialization of grief just leapt out at me. I think because of my interest in and my ability and my experience to hold with people when they're going through tough times and difficult emotions. So that just spoke to me, and I did that. And in the process of getting my coach certification, my mother died. And it was a sudden, she had not been really well, but we did not expect her to pass really suddenly. And so it really pulled full focus to my interest in helping people go through grief and loss and create a life that they love on the other side of a difficult loss. So I've been doing that work I started that in 2012, 2013. And, fast forward to 2021, my husband of 16 years, this is our second marriage, my husband died suddenly.
Oh
And
no.
so not only did, I know about grief coaching and how to help people, go through that kind of loss, I really had to slow down and take the maps that I had and walk the territory on my own. And so it was a really difficult time for me, but at the
Hmm.
same time, I took myself through my program of rebuilding your life after loss. And here I am, 3 years, 3.5 years later, and I would say that my interest and my ability and my passion really for helping people in this space is back. I have shifted my focus a little bit to call myself, instead of a grief coach, to call myself a spiritual resilience coach. And
Oh, I
we'll
like
get into
that.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's the direction that we're going into.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And I think, isn't it interesting? I have the same kind of experience for myself. I really am a shadow work facilitator,
Hmm.
but most people don't like talking about shadow.
Mm.
And, oh my God, I have to look at all the ugly, horrible, bad, evil stuff that's inside me and blah, 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 blah. That's where their mind goes when they start thinking about that. So
Yeah.
I really don't refer to that topic at all. And probably for a similar reason to you. I like looking at the positive side. Let's look at life mastery. Let's look at magnificence. Let's look at the ways that you can, get to know yourself more deeply and love yourself completely, whatever that takes. And yeah, what people don't know is I'm still going to bring them to look at their shadows, but
Yeah.
and I'm sure you do the same thing. Uh,
Exactly. We're going to talk
we're,
about grief. We're going to talk
of
about
course, yeah.
all the things that are underneath the pot that's brewing in your life. Yeah. Good point, David.
Yeah, and well, I've also found for myself that I had challenges with anger in the past, and when I started uncovering a lot of that anger, what did I discover underneath? Grief,
Pain, grief. Yeah.
sorrow,
Yeah.
pain, stuff that I just simply did not want to feel. But I can say, just from my own personal experience, by giving myself the permission to allow those feelings to come out and to just feel them and let them pass, it was the most liberating experience I've ever had in my life.
Yeah.
And it brought me back to a place. Listen, I'm not going to say that I've solved every problem in the world. No, not at all. I am going to say that I immediately had a huge jump in awareness, consciousness,
Yeah.
and passion and everything else. And that level has stayed there. So now my little roller coaster is at a higher level,
Mhm. Yeah.
It's very, very different now.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it was my grief experience of losing my husband, Tom, that once I had sort of gotten my foundation and my footing, where I wasn't crying every day, and all the things that we go through, I started turning my attention to what is it that really helps us uh, create that new life that we're going to love. Even in the face of our identity crisis, or the things that we go through when something significant in our lives has ended. So I started turning my attention towards what is it in our humanness, in our divinity, that really calls us into what's next. And that's where I started really researching and experiencing these qualities of spiritual resilience that we'll talk about in a little bit.
Well, I think, first of all, that's a beautiful kind of question to ask. What is it that, or how do I, when you ask questions like that, it's like saying to the universe, go ahead, I'm open, I'm waiting for the answer. And
Yeah.
maybe the answer's already there and you just haven't quite figured out how to articulate it yet. But that's a beautiful, beautiful question.
Mm.
I love that question. What is it about our humanness? Beautiful question. And so tell me a little bit about what you found out.
Well, I started playing around with, we know what resilience is. The definition, it's, if you look it up in the dictionary, it's that capacity to withstand or to recover quickly from a difficult situation. It's like a toughness, right?
Right.
It's also the ability of a substance or an object to spring back into shape once it's been, messed with a little bit. So
Right.
elasticity, so toughness and elasticity. I'm just like, okay, that's great. A better definition is like that ability to successfully adapt to stress and maintaining a psychological well-being in the face of adversity. So it's like, oh, we're getting a little closer here.
Right.
My point of view started to take shape after working, in this field is, you know, I'm talking about what is it that's inside of us that's always present, even when we forget, even when the rug has been pulled out from under us? What is it that remains true and intact all throughout our lives? And I call it the authentic self. I think many people do. I
Right.
didn't coin that phrase. It resolves in each one of us. We just forget sometimes that it's there because we're overlaid with stress, with grief, with, the situations. So I started to play with this idea of spiritual resilience is that choice to more deeply connect with your authentic self when you need to recover from a traumatic event or a loss in your life or adversity.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's beautiful. I totally resonate with what you're saying. I've used that phrase "authentic self" before. I found it. There's a lot of people who use that terminology, and in fact, the word authenticity seems to be a little bit overused. It's almost become kind of cliche in many ways nowadays.
Yeah.
Um, how do I know whether I'm being authentic or not in any given moment? That's really
Yeah.
the question. Uh,
Yeah.
and for me, the difference between whether I'm being real and authentic or whether I'm just posturing in order to please you or to make you happy or whatever it is I'm doing, the difference has to do with whether I'm letting my ego mind run the show or whether I'm letting my soul
Mhm.
have its space. And so it very much to me is a spiritual choice, a choice of connecting back to the true essence of who I am, the soul, and allowing the ego mind, thank you so much for all you do for me, but allowing it to just go quiet and become a more of a supportive entity in my life rather than the controlling entity in my life. Yeah,
Yeah.
I really like what you were saying there.
Well said, David. It's we all have an ego, and there's nothing wrong with the ego. We need the ego as well
Of
as
course.
we need the soul. The soul inside of us, and I don't so necessarily use the word soul and authentic self interchangeably, but it has that quality of the part of us that, if you believe certain religious beliefs, the soul lives on. The
Right.
soul is that true, authentic part of us, and we bring in, onto the earth school in our funny looking bodies and our egos and our preferences and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But soul is the part that it knows who you are. It knows what your purpose is. It is your guiding North Star, that kind of thing. So
Right.
it is really, it's said very beautifufully by I'm going to butcher the French, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. He
Right.
says, we are not human beings that have a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience.
Exactly right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that's one of my favorite quotes, and I remember hearing that years ago, and I said, "Oh yeah, well that's of course it's true. It's one of
Yeah.
those things that it's true the moment you hear it.
Yeah.
You
It
know,
just rings true, doesn't it? Yeah.
that's right, that's right, and it's a beautiful statement. I think there are many others who have said similar things. I
Mhm.
remember there's another phrase that I'm sure you've heard and I've heard, it's "we are all one."
Mhm. Yeah.
And of course, I used to laugh at that. I said, "Oh yeah, right. We're all one. I mean, like, yeah, we're one country, we're one nation, we're one world. Blah 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 blah." I thought it's a great bumper sticker,
Mhm.
but I've never had the physical experience of this idea of oneness until I started doing my own personal growth work.
Mhm.
You know, when I think I was sharing with you before, I had all this anger, and when I started peeling it away, what did I get down to but grief? Well, when I
Mhm.
started processing that grief and allowed that to come out and just to feel it, the experience that I had was momentary sense of emptiness,
Mhm.
you know, and then an immediate inflow of this beautiful golden blue light that just filled me with joy and gratitude and love. And I could see this light kind of extending out and connecting to all of the other people who were in the room. I couldn't see their faces anymore. All I could see was their essence.
Mm.
And they were all this same gold blue light. And I
Mm.
said, oh, so this is what they mean by we are all one.
Yeah.
I get it now. And it's
Yeah.
not just a bumper sticker anymore, you know?
Yeah.
So this is something that, I mean, anybody can experience this if they choose, but it requires a conscious effort. You have to say, I am choosing to connect in to my true essence, my true authentic self, my true spiritual beingness.
Yeah.
And I'm choosing to allow my ego mind to just simply go off on a vacation somewhere so that I can be present to that. It
Yeah.
takes a little bit of effort, but once you get there, you can experience that sense of bliss, that sense of oneness anytime you want to. It's really quite an amazing experience.
Yeah. And not only that, David, what you're talking about is a beautiful spiritual opening experience. Oftentimes, our openings to these kinds of experiences come through grief and loss. You know,
Absolutely.
it's like, okay, got your attention, right?
Yep.
And the ways that we operate in the world get suspended from their ability to be effective for a little bit, while we tend to, it's like there's a wound that's happened that needs healing and love and attention. And so you're talking about a choice, and that's a powerful thing. And when I'm talking with people who are in the midst of grief, we we have to be very careful of trying to reframe or trying to oh, you have a choice. Is like, no, that they're in this period of time where they just need to be sort of nurtured, and that their feelings and their experiences normalized. And once they sort of develop some energy to start to move forward and to look at choices, that's when we can start with this idea of, this spiritual resilience that we want to cultivate inside of you. It will contribute to your post-traumatic growth. And
Right.
we will learn. We have some choices in the way that we react to stress. You can react as a victim, and we all do it, right? Where there's hurt and sadness and anguish and all of those things, sorrow, all of those things that we go through. And we'll withdraw, we're going to hide, we're going to isolate ourselves, we're going to numb ourselves from this kind of pain, right?
Hmm.
And then also, to your point, you were talking about the anger. We're going to have a conflict reaction also, where, like, we're blaming, oh, well, she died because they made a mistake at the hospital. And we're really looking for who to blame for this big loss. And so we argue, we fight, we look for, like, whose fault is this? We're controlling. These are reactions to a kind of a situation. And for us to rise above that, it does take work, because when fight, flight, freeze, it's a real thing, right?
Sure.
So
Hmm.
we're not really thinking as our executive functioning will allow us. We're just reacting.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, so you're right. There's sometimes, we all have things that appear in front of us that may seem like obstacles. And these obstacles, we can go over them, we can go around them, we can go
Mhm.
underneath them, we can blow them up, we can do whatever. But sometimes you can't really do that. None of those things work, and the only way to get on the other side is by going through it.
Yeah.
And but even so, whether we like it or not, it still boils down to a choice. If I'm choosing to fight the obstacle, that is a choice. If I'm choosing to get angry at the obstacle, that too is a choice. I may not be aware of the choice, but that it's still a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's my only reason for mentioning that.
Yeah.
The other thing, that you mentioned, this idea of supporting people to have their experience. I 100% agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that is the definition of compassion.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about, for me, compassion is about recognizing that you're having some kind of a challenge, because I can empathize with that in some way. And also, I have a desire to act. I have a desire to reach out and help you deal with that problem.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I just dive in and start saying, oh, this is what you need, and I start doing that, well, that's not going to help you at all, right? Well, it might, but the chances are probably pretty slim. What I need to do is I need to pause, and I need to say to you, wow, it looks like you're going through a difficult time. Is there something I can do that would help you get through this?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe to rephrase it a little more so that you actually give me an answer, what can I do to help you through this?
Yeah.
And then you can tell me, well, you can get lost for the next 5 hours. Okay, great. Thank you. I will step by, but you know where I am. If you need something, I will be here. Please don't hesitate to reach out. This is, to me, what compassion is all about. I want to help you find a way through your suffering, but I don't want to come up with my own solution.
Right.
I think you have to come up with yours. And so you're right. Sometimes you got to feel it. You got to feel the anger. You got to feel the anguish. You got to feel the sorrow. You got to somehow process it all, so that once that dies down a little bit, you can have a clearer mind, a clearer heart, and start thinking more appropriately about what it is you really want to do and what kind of support you might benefit from.
Yeah. And, I talk to so many people who, come towards me because they've tried to do this on their own, feel their feelings. And, it's overwhelming sometimes to try to do this work on our own, because
Right.
look, we're naturally wired to avoid pain.
Right.
And so we're going to avoid all day long. But it takes a compassionate companion, a safe space where, you come into this place of, there's nothing wrong with you. You're going through something really hard. You're going to have some feelings about that. And I'm here to listen to, it's like so many people just need a safe place to talk and not be fixed and not be, well,
Exactly.
here's what you ought to do. And, it just talk about a way to make a grieving person angry.
Yeah.
There's so many things that people
Oh, I
say.
can think of all kinds of things. Oh, don't worry about it. Life goes on. Come on, get over yourself. Oh, yeah, right. That's really helpful.
Right. And people mean well, they think that they're helping, but really the best thing to do when you're with someone who's grieving and they're really in that painful, critical grieving stage, at just a fresh grief, is to just listen, companion,
Right.
and just be there. And a lot of people, we're not trained how to do that because we're not trained how to deal with our own emotional lives, right, David?
Exactly.
So it's like here, let me give you a tissue. Stop that crying right now, because we're uncomfortable, and
And
all that.
and think about the unconscious message that we're sending when we do that.
Yeah.
One of the things that I learned a while back, quite a few years ago, actually, I had the tendency to want to reach out and give someone a hug.
Mm-hmm.
Here, let me give you a hug. Well, what is the hug but my way of saying, here, you obviously cannot support yourself. Let me wrap my arms around you and provide you with support. And that also has this tendency, even just touching a person who's going through this experience can take them out of the experience almost instantly, and therefore take away from the healing that they could get otherwise.
Yeah.
So now I've learned I will stand back and I'll say, I'm here if you need me. If you want a shoulder to cry on, if you want to lean on me, you can do that. Whatever you need, I'm here for that.
Yeah.
And I'm not afraid of your anger. I'm not afraid of your grief. I'm not afraid of any of it. I'm here just to be present to it and to support you.
And the world needs more of us who are able to do that for people when they're hurting, or when they're, when they've gone through a traumatic experience. So David, yeah, I think we're preaching to the choir when it comes how to support people. And what I started, in my own grief process, what I started like leaning into, I'd learned in my coach training program that all people are whole, creative, resourceful, and capable, and that
Yeah, this
we're
is
to treat
nice.
them as such. We're not here and they're there. We're peer to peer. We're creating this space for people to remember their wholeness, creativity, resourcefulness, and capability. So I thought, okay, if that is still inside of me, let me lean into each of these four qualities and see how that helps me to adapt to this loss that I've experienced. And so, well, like wholeness, the first one, you talked about wholeness of we are all one. It's also this like we are all, I'm all one inside of me. I'm not
Right.
broken, I'm not brokenhearted. There's nothing that's um, not contributing to my wholeness, even when I'm feeling broken,
Yeah.
so it's at the heart of authenticity is to recognize that we are whole, to embrace all aspects of ourselves, both light and shadow, both the imperfections, the vulnerabilities, the complexities, the pain and the joy. It's not striving for perfection, but just integrating all of these somewhat dualistic experiences that we go through. And the whole thing is to recognize that in all this complexity, we are whole. We embrace that wholeness, we cultivate that self-compassion, and that leads to a sense like you were talking about in your experience of knowing, that we are all one. And there's something about if we can, when we're supporting another person, go into that place, it's not a sympathy and I feel sorry for you. And it's not even just an empathy. It's like I have places inside of myself that I have had that kind of pain. So it's like
Right.
you say energetically, I get you, you know?
Hmm.
So, and, I just started diving into this a little bit. Well, what is wholeness? What is it that helps us really embrace and experience wholeness? That, there's a therapy called internal family systems, which is a great way
Is that
of,
like constellation
yeah,
therapy?
it's very similar. It's
Hmm.
where we understand that at the core of us is our true self, and then we have these other parts of ourselves
Hmm.
that play
Hmm.
a role also. And so IFS, the idea is if we have these parts called exiles of an experience or a part of ourselves that we don't accept, we send it into exile. We have also managers and firefighters. The managers are, we're here to, keep everything on an even keel and all hunky dory and in our bubble and no trouble. And the firefighters recognize if there's danger, psychologically in our midst, like we're going to have to face something we don't want to face or see something, the firefighters will come and shut that down. It's like,
Right.
so it's in these parts of us, it's not necessarily that they're bad or wrong, they just get overburdened. They start thinking that they're running the show instead of this core part of us, the essence. So the ideal of internal family systems is to get the person to remember, that wholeness and unburden the parts. So that's a very high level, skimming the surface look at IFS, but it's also the Hermetic principles. I mean, we've studied spiritual wholeness, ever since we've been, able to cook our food and have, have been able to take care of ourselves as human beings. So there's a lot to study. There's a lot of intellectual stuff out there, but it's like you were experiencing. It's that knowing that inside of me is a place. I'm going through something really hard, but this part of me is unchanged, and
Yeah.
that wholeness is what's going to pull me through this.
Well, I think I love this. That first of all, the word wholeness uh, implies that there's nothing missing, there's nothing that needs to be fixed, and
Mhm.
therefore, if I'm whole, then I'm already perfect. There are no imperfections.
Right.
The imperfections are merely aspects of myself that I have judgments about. That's all they are. And so any idea of imperfection is merely judgment, and worse than that, well, I shouldn't say worse. More than that, it is a projection, because I often choose not to see those so-called things that I'm judging inside myself. Instead, I'll see them in you, and I'll see them in other people. And I'll blame you for having that feature that I think is bad within me. That
Mhm.
is what we tend to do. And that's all ego mind stuff. That's all
Mhm.
it is, you know? And remember, the ego mind has a purpose, which is to help us navigate this physical world. And in doing so, it has to watch out for dangers, and it has to keep us safe. That's its job.
Yeah.
But often it sees dangers where there are no dangers. And those
It doesn't.
dangers are based upon ancient history from, way back in childhood. Your mom might have said something and you felt this way, and now your ego mind is watching out for exactly that situation again today. And is it happening? Well, maybe, but is it really dangerous? No, probably not.
Mhm.
So I think this is all just wonderful, and I like this idea of wholeness. Now, just remind me, please, what are the other three qualities that you talked about?
So we've got wholeness, resourcefulness, creativity, and capability. And so when I was going through, rebuilding my life after the loss of my husband, wholeness was the first thing. And so it really got me in touch with my spiritual practices where I could experience myself as whole, as, as I'm going to be okay, right? Like telling the ego, let's just park you over here for a little bit, and let's just dive into a feeling of being at one with all that is, and so that was a first line of defense. Capability was an interesting one also. So when we're going through a situation, sometimes we feel incapable of handling all of the stuff, inner and outer, that is thrust on us. We get overwhelmed by things, right? And so capability is, if you think about personal capability, it's skills and knowledge that we have, it's competencies, it's physical and mental abilities, it's what we know based on our experience, what we can handle, right?
Mhm.
And sometimes when we're going through like the loss of a partner or a husband or wife, where they handled certain things in the marriage, that was our deal, right? And so for me, it was the finances. It was I wouldn't say that I felt incapable of handling finances. I had done it as a single person, but when he took over, he really took over. And so it's like all of our passwords, all of our accounts, everything was in his computer, and I couldn't get the password. And so I had to, pull myself into my capability of being able to recreate a financial life that I could survive. And so, I had to exercise talents and skills that maybe had been put to the wayside to get to the goal, which was, hey, I need money to survive, and I need to pay my bills, and so it's like that's just one sort of example of how capability can come into it, because you think, oh, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to turn the TV on with this very fancy remote that has 20 buttons on it. So that
Mhm.
leads to the next one, which is resourcefulness. If we don't have the capability to do something, we have the ability to find somebody who does. So resourcefulness is our, we're able to, if you think about resourcefulness, yeah, capability is into it, but we're going to exercise our creativity. We're going to go, if I don't know how to do this, who does? Who can do this? If I need to adapt to a certain situation, adjust to new conditions, if I need to find a practical solution to something, if I need to take initiative to find information or find people that can help me. And we have to be persistent. We don't give up, right? We don't just go, oh, well, it can't be done. And we also have to trust, that the answer is there somewhere. If I don't have it, somebody has it. So it's like you think of MacGyvering something, right? It was like,
I
well,
didn't know that was a verb.
well, I've heard of it that way. It's like, okay, with duct tape, I can do anything, right?
Right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
And like we get into crisis management, we have that list on the fridge of the police phone numbers, and that's resourcefulness. We don't have to feel like we have to do everything ourselves.
Right.
So it's also in reaching out to others. I found both painful situations and very helpful situations that renewed my faith in humanity. The
Mm-hmm.
painful situations, I remember I was on the phone talking to the satellite thing guy, the TV guy, and
Mm-hmm.
was trying to figure out the TV because that was Tom's thing. He's an engineer, and like I said, the remote with 40 buttons on it. It's like, I just want to turn it on, right? And so I'm talking to the guy, at, I wouldn't even say the company, it was one of the satellite, direct TV, something like that. And I'm saying, look, you need to talk me through this, step by step. And, of course he's talking me through it, and I'm getting frustrated and it's not working. And all of a sudden he goes, and I had told him at the beginning, my husband died 3 weeks ago, and so says, the guy says, well, okay, I see we're a little stuck here. Why don't you put your husband on the phone? And I was just like,
Oh no.
I'm going to reach to the phone and slap you.
Right.
Well, I would love to, but he's dead.
Oh
So
my.
so that was not a great experience, but the great experiences that I've had of, meeting a wonderful handyman who could just come and fix everything, and just be very gentle and sweet about it, and not charge me an arm and a leg. So resourcefulness is a huge quality to lean into. And then
Right.
creativity is one where we are infinitely creative. And if
Right.
we can create solutions to problems, we can create something out of nothing. It's
That's
like
right. Mm-hmm.
it's like reaffirming these abilities of wholeness, capability, resourcefulness, and creativity. It just gives us that confidence to know, what, life does not look the same as it did when I had my husband, but I can create a life that will work for me, that I will love. And so for me, it reached into the spiritual aspects also, and it also reached into the very, outer world, and just doing what you got to do. So
Right.
that's a long narrative there,
No,
David.
no, that was great. That was great. And I
Yeah.
and I love all of those four qualities that you're talking about. I think they're very, very important and relevant for our conversation. As you were speaking, I had this thought, oh my God, all my passwords and stuff are on my computer. If I just if I kick the bucket tomorrow, how is anybody going to get access to my stuff and figure out what to do? So I think it's just a little reminder. Thank you so much for this. That maybe I need to do something that's not on the computer and put it in a document somewhere, lock it up in a safe deposit box or something, and say, this is where you find all my stuff. And this is, yeah,
Yeah.
good idea. Thank you for the reminder.
You're welcome. I learned the hard way that what can happen when you don't have access to that stuff. And through, persistence and the help of others, I was able to, I learned, David, I didn't even have any credit accounts in my name. They were all in his
Wow.
name. And so I was like, oh, because like I'm no longer an authorized user on an account for somebody who's passed. So I had to mobilize pretty fast and get credit in my name, which, I was able to do. But it's like the things that you don't think of until you're forced to think about them.
Right, right, right. Yeah. Yeah, that's really, really interesting. Another piece of information for the puzzle. Now, I know that you have talked a little bit about post-traumatic growth. That's a new phrase to me. I mean, I think I know what you're talking about, but I'm wondering if you can just share a little bit about what that means to you and how it fits into the whole picture of spiritual resilience.
Yeah, yeah. Well, post-traumatic growth is something that's being researched quite heavily right now because we all go through trauma, and trauma has been, the definition of trauma has also been somewhat expanded. Everybody and their aunt was talking about that they have PTSD, and so it's
Right.
that and narcissism, the big psychological buzzwords that are out there in the mainstream. So we start to talk about, well, what happens when we go through a trauma and when we are able to resolve the trauma inside of us. Typically, what happens is we learn, we grow from the experience because we've been stretched way out of the comfort zone,
Hmm.
both in the experience that we had and also in the healing process. So you said a phrase, something that was so accurate. It's where we can stay still enough and not try to rush through, recreating our lives or replacing the loss or, doing any of those things to mitigate our pain. If we can stay still and allow ourselves to empty, to just, okay, I no longer, I'm not a wife, take that out of my bucket of self-identifications. It's like if we are able to start emptying and sit with the discomfort of the emptying process, and if we want to grow something, we have to start from a clean slate. If you're going to grow a
Yeah.
garden, you got to rip everything out, the weeds, everything that's there, in order to have a neutral, playing field to start planting what you want to grow. And so this is being researched where, you know, a lot of people, who is it that goes through a traumatic experience and then grows from it? And who is it that goes from a traumatic experience and doesn't survive it,
Right.
or is really severely impacted by it and their lives kind of shut down? And so
Mhm.
there's a lot of research in this area. And so I started asking myself the question, what if these qualities of spiritual resilience actually contribute to post-traumatic growth? And the more I dived into a little bit of the research on this is what I found were some of the factors of the people who would thrive, who would grow after a traumatic experience. So I
Right,
don't know if
right,
that answers the question, but that's what I found.
right. Well, I mean, it all makes perfect sense to me. I think again, it comes down to uh, for me that I believe that everything always comes down to choice. It really
Yeah.
does. Yeah, I could have some kind of a traumatic event in my life, and I could choose to make it all about how I am an evil person and don't deserve to have anything, or I could make up all kinds of stories about that event if I wanted to. Or I could look at it and I could say, wow, the universe just threw me a curveball. I missed it when I swung. But now, what can I learn from this experience? I can be ready for the next curveball, can't I?
Mhm.
And almost certainly I'm going to get another one sooner or later, because the universe is really cool that way. you know, um, so I have the choice to either learn from my experience now or wait for the next curveball and learn later.
Mhm. And sometimes
So
that's what we do. The first
that's right. That's right.
experience doesn't necessarily get our attention, or we don't have the resources or the support that we need to empty, to stay in that empty place until we're able to start building what is it we want to add to our lives that's new.
Right.
um you said something interesting. Even you can take it to the most mundane of lessons to learn. I learned I put all of everything that I own in a trust. My daughter, I only have one daughter. She and I are trustees of everything I own. So when I eventually you know, no longer on the planet, she will have unfettered access to everything I have. And
Right.
that experience of going through Tom's, sudden death, he wasn't planning on having a heart attack that day. So he really thought, he was handling everything, but it was, pardon my French, a shit show,
All right.
So, it's like, I'm not doing that to my daughter. So, that's even just a very practical, definite, example of post-traumatic growth is like, I don't want my daughter to go through what I went through. So let me handle this.
Right. Yeah. I remember when I had. I mean, see, every experience that we have is an opportunity for more growth. It doesn't have to be traumatic at all. You
Mm-hmm.
know, but if we choose to ignore that and just simply carry on as if, yeah, okay, I'm just going this way, that's all. um,
Which is what we do, David,
right. I know.
honestly, right? It's like, oh, I'm all good. We've got something in the chat box. Your narrative to be still and become empty enough to be refilled reminds of nature and how a forest fire brings forward new growth. Yeah, if you're in a forest fire, it's pretty, um, scary and devastating and traumatic and all of that. And, it does, nature has a purpose in that to stimulate new growth after a forest fire. So yeah, great example there.
I was thinking about this when it was in 2013, I believe, or maybe it was 2000. No, 2000. I can't remember that time frame. 2000. Yeah, 2013. I was driving home from a company picnic, and it was like 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the afternoon. And have you ever kind of felt yourself drifting off to sleep while you're driving, and you feel
Yeah,
that kind of jerk as you wake back up?
yeah.
Well, I had that experience, except I didn't jerk awake. I fell asleep, and I was out, like unconscious out for, I don't know, a couple of seconds maybe. I have no idea what caused it. But anyway, I was going around a curve at the time that this was happening on the freeway at 65 miles an hour.
Mm.
Well, of course, I let go of the steering wheel and the car straightened out and it started going. And well, let me just I'll make a long story short. I ended up flying through the bushes at about 65 miles an hour, literally flying, and coming to rest in a big pile of bushes. There was a lot of other details I could share about this because it's a really amazing story. But what happened was the car doors were stuck. I couldn't open them after the car came to rest. So my only way out of the car was by climbing out through the sunroof. And when I climbed out through the sunroof, I looked back towards the rear of the car and I saw these big, giant oak trees. They couldn't have been
Mm.
more than 6 feet apart. And both of them had strips of white where the bark had been peeled away.
Mm.
And in that moment, I realized, holy shit, I flew between those two posts, goal posts. That's what I called it. And those things were like 5 feet off the ground. So I was right off the ground. I thought a half an inch either way, and I wouldn't be even looking at this right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, tears just kind of came out of me, and I thought, oh my God, what just happened?
Yeah.
And in that moment, I realized the whole notion of falling asleep and not paying attention was the way I had been living my life.
Mm.
And it was such a wake up call in more ways than one. It just really told me, dude, you've got a message to deliver. Quit messing around and do it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't care if you think that people don't listen to you. I don't care if you think that you haven't got the qualifications. Get out there and share the message. You know the truth already. You had it 10 years ago. You had that experience of oneness. Why aren't you sharing this with the world?
Mm-hmm.
It completely changed the way I approached my life from that point forward. And all of a sudden, almost everything I was doing was now focused on coaching and teaching and getting this message out. I ended up losing my job 3 years later, and you know, all of it just kind of came together. So I ended up moving here to Meridian, Idaho, and all of it now. I mean, if that event had not happened, what would I be doing today?
You
So
know what? Yeah. You know what
I'm
I'm
just
also
saying that
thinking?
everything
Yeah.
that happens in your life happens to, I believe, I really do believe it happens because you have a mission that you came here for that you may have forgotten about the moment you were born.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the thing is these things are going to happen until you get back on track to what you actually came here to do. That's what I believe. And a lot of people think, oh, yeah, that's just crazy spiritual bullshit. And I'm thinking, well, maybe it is, but it sure it feels true to me.
Yeah. You know what I'm also taking away from this story, this amazing story, David, is think of how protected you were even in that situation.
Oh, yeah.
That your car it flew through the goalposts, right?
Yep.
So it's like that is to me an example of what I also experience in every step along the way. I'm being held, I'm being supported, I'm being looked after, right? And uh, I just got chills as you were talking about that story. That it's such a definition that you know your time is not up. We're protecting you. We want to make sure. When I say we, whatever that is, right? The
Right.
universal, you know, oneness or whatever that God, you know, whatever choice of words people use. But God wasn't done with you. But God wanted you to wake up.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
know, I'll tell you, Carrie, I've already decided I'm going to write a novel about this
Mm,
because it's such an important story, and uh, it's all about awakening. I think that's really what the story is about. It's about waking up. It's about coming back to the truth of who you really are. I want people to kind of feel it from a different perspective. You know, I've shared this story in other formats in my nonfiction work, but I think I'm going to write a novel about it
mm,
and create a I haven't figured out all the details, but I think it's such an important thing, and it has
yeah.
to be said, you know. So
Mm-hmm. Beautiful, David.
yeah. So I wanted to ask you. I know that you've been doing a lot of this work with people for a long time now,
Yeah.
and you were talking about your own program, the fact that you took yourself through your own program. I'm assuming that as a result of taking yourself through that program, you have refined it and perfected it and now made it available to other people. Is that right?
Yeah.
And
Well, not only that, I mean, I had created my 9-step program for rebuilding your life after loss. It was, you know, one of those experiences where I think we've all experienced this sometime where information was just downloaded to me. It wasn't like I just sat and thought of all, it was just like I was talking to my coach in the car. You know, I was in the car. I was and because I was like building my company. What am I going to call this? It's like Life's Next Chapter Coaching. That is the name that I want for my business. And he says, well, you know, what's your program? What are you going to be offering? And all of a sudden I'm like sitting there on with like a little notepad and just it's this 9 steps, there's 9 steps. So, so when it was given to me in that way, and then I started delivering it and started using it as the vehicle to assist people in rebuilding, I was like, well, this is a great opportunity for me to test drive this. So I
Beautiful.
took myself through the steps, honestly, and not only that, I had
So
a
you can
different,
write your own testimonial then.
yeah, exactly. And the steps are pretty powerful. And it's not like with anything, sometimes you go through step 1 and then 3 and then 2 and then back to 1, and then, you know what I mean. But it works. So
Good.
that was a validation, from my own experience, that if I apply what I am applying with others, not only does it work for them, but it worked for me. And I was able to tweak things also. So,
Yeah, that's nice.
yeah.
And so I also understand that you have like an offer that you would like people to know about today. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yes. Well, I am in my Rebuilding Your Life After Loss program. I have created an online course
Oh,
that,
beautiful.
yeah, yeah. And so what it is I've taken some of the most powerful elements of it and put it into a 6-week course. So it's a hybrid course. So there's online learning, and every week there's a session with me and the other learners in the program. So it's kind of like a group coaching call. And so not only are you learning, but you're also being supported in putting into practice what you're learning. And so I'm launching the next cohort for this. It'll be at the beginning of 2025. I think we're actually launching it in February. So if people want to find out about that and how to get registered for it, they could reach out to me on my email address, which I suppose will be in the show notes or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, great. But you mentioned, I thought you mentioned in your email to me that you had
Yeah.
some kind of an offer that you wanted to give people today. So we may get a little
Yes.
taste of this.
Yeah. It is another course that I created even before this, called Transitions and Transformation. And let me see, I can talk to you a little bit about this. Um, this one is completely online. And so it is, it's a free, a gift that I'm giving for free for anybody who is either on the call or wants or is listening to it afterwards. And it is really helping people understand the difference between change and transition. And
Right.
when change is something that happens to us often. Change, it happens in our outer world. My wife dies. I've lost my job. Something happens, right? And it can be stressful. And even if it's a change that you wanted, say you got married or you got a new job and a promotion, change can be stressful. And transition is the psychological reorientation and the inner integration of the changes that have happened on the outer level. So when you're going through changes, the transition process can cause people trouble if they're not prepared for it, if they don't really know, how to navigate through transition. So I created this course to help people do that. And so it's about the process of learning, how change affects us and how transition and embracing and learning about that can help us smooth through the process of change. So I can give a copy. Let's see. Let
Yeah,
me
just
put,
copy the link and drop it into
yeah,
the chat.
there it is. So
Okay.
that's the link. If you click on that link, it will take you over to the course, and it applies the discount code already. So it's a free
Oh,
course.
good.
Yeah.
So well, I'm going to add that not only here, but also on my website for
Okay.
something that people who come to the website can sign up that way.
Yeah, I can.
That sounds really awesome. I mean, transition is, listen, let's face it. It's kind of like training wheels for when the hard stuff hits.
Yeah. Well, it's
That's
understanding where you are in the process. You know how it is. We need to know where am I? You know,
yeah,
we have endings, we have new beginnings, and in the middle is this period of time where it's really messy and it's really uncomfortable because we like to feel certain about where we're headed. And when we're in
right.
this neutral zone of between an ending and a new beginning, the impetus is to hurry up and create a new beginning. Oh, get a new dog, get a new wife, get a new job. You know, it's like I don't want to feel this uncomfortable uncertainty that I've been
God, if
thrust
only it was that
into.
easy.
I know. Well, you know, and how many times have we heard of people, you know, getting a divorce and then getting into another marriage, you know, just as the judgment came, and then recreating the same issues in the second
Exactly.
marriage. So
Yep,
we
yep.
need this time in the discomfort, in the uncomfortable unknown, to really ask
Yep.
ourselves these questions of, well, who am I now? What do I want? What do I really want? What's really important to me? What's always important to me? What do I need to look at in terms of my purpose in life? You know, what is the
Yeah.
contribution I want to make in the world? You need to slow down and ask yourself these questions. And this course helps you do that. It helps you slow down so that you're not trying to hurry past this uncomfortable self-reflective process. Because once you
Well, you
do
just
that,
gave yourself a title of
yeah.
another blog article. It's called The Uncomfortable Unknown. Go ahead and use that title and write a blog article about it. I think yeah, that'd be great. I
Yeah.
look forward to reading that.
Thank you, David. Thank you for your encouragement.
Well, Carrie, as always, it's just been a joy and a pleasure to share space with you. We're at our time now, and I just wanted to ask if you had any final words you want to share before I close us out.
I think, you know, it's so lovely to be with you, David. And my word of encouragement to anybody who's going through a tough time, you know, a traumatic experience, a loss, you don't have to do this alone. You know,
Right.
you don't have to try and just buck up and pull yourself up by your bootstraps and move on. You know, get help, whether it's with your own people who can and know how to be helpful, and sometimes we need to reach out to professionals who can help us with that. You know, this is what my business is based upon, and you know, don't try to do this alone, because often we just will end up delaying or avoiding, minimizing, and delaying our healing process.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my word of encouragement. We need a
Well,
village
thank
like.
you, Carrie. That was beautiful. And I want to say thank you again just for being here. And everybody, I hope you've gained a deeper understanding of how to cultivate spiritual resilience in your own life and maybe learn to embrace loss and adversity, not as permanent defeats, but as opportunities to rise stronger, to reconnect with your authentic self, and to experience personal transformation. Thank you all for watching today's program. Remember, you can catch the recordings of this and every other episode on my website at lifemasterytv.com. Friends, I also want to invite you to remember to practice my life mastery mantra every single day. It's simple, 3 parts. It goes like this. I gratefully forgive the imperfect being I have been in the past. I gratefully accept the magnificent being I am right now. I gratefully welcome the evolved being I am becoming in each new moment. So until we meet again, I'm David McLeod, your life mastery coach, wishing you love, light, and blessings on your continuing journey. And I'll see you next time right here on Life Mastery TV. Bye-bye.